So welcome everybody. While the screen is loading.
Are you seeing my webinars page or the presentation?
I'm seeing your webinars page, not the presentation.
Okay.
We're having some technical issues on my end because there's some workers who just messed up both phone service and internet service to our neighborhood who are trying to correct it. So Amy's going to show the slides and I'll just do the talking. So welcome everybody. Amy, we can see a little yellow box covering the slide.
Yep, something's processing. It's almost done, and then I think that will, here, I'll slide it out. How's that?
Oh, no, there it goes.
Okay.
So this webinar was really set up for anyone who, there's a few different kind of groups that we've heard of. There are folks who just didn't hear about this series in the very beginning, or they didn't have any kind of communication system in the very beginning. So maybe they knew that this was happening, but they weren't ready yet to get started. We've heard from a whole bunch of folks who have gone out and bought iPads or were part of the last round where the ASF was able to distribute iPads. But by that point, the series had already started. We have a bunch of folks who have purchased iPads as a Christmas present for their person with Angelman, and now they want to get started. We have folks who started with the series in the beginning, and then real life caught up with them, and they fell behind. And they just don't quite know how to get started, how to now pick up again if you started with the series in the beginning and now you're halfway through. So really all of those people is who this webinar is targeted at, wherever your starting point is. What we're trying to do is really just build a ramp for you to join the series right now. What a lot of folks have tried to do is go to the ASF website and just try to start at the first webinar and work their way through, but that's way too much work. You're never going to be able to do that and still actually catch up with where we are right now. So we have some ideas for how to, in a much more feasible way, how you can join us where we're at. And remember that all of these webinars are being recorded and stored long-term. So if there's content that you've missed, that's perfectly fine. You can go back and revisit that in a year. We did the series this way on purpose because we knew that our families are at a whole bunch of different places, and we wanted to present content in the series that is applicable whether you're brand new to the idea of a communication system and just getting started with a few key words, or if you've been using a communication system with your child for a while and they're actually using it and you don't know how to build that into something richer, or if you're looking for more academic connections for how your child can use their system at school, all of that kind of thing. So we built the series knowing that and not expecting people would watch every single webinar from start to finish and try to follow the whole thing, but trying to build it multi-level. And what we've been doing over the last week or two, what Maureen has been doing, because she is our organization guru, is setting up a more transparent kind of organizational system to the webinars. And that's what I'm going to show you so that you know kind of more easily where to start. So Amy, go ahead and advance the slide, and we'll talk about today's webinar. So what we're going to do today is just do an overview of what this project is and help you learn more about how to access the different resources that we've put together in this project. We'll talk about the topics of all the different webinars that we're covering and how we're organizing the webinars within those topics to get to a point where you can just identify your personal next steps, because based on wherever you are currently is kind of what I'm going to recommend you do as a first step going forward from here. Go ahead, Amy. So our overview of the training series is where we're going to start. And go ahead to the next slide. The ASF Communication Training Series is a year-long grant-funded project. It's funded by the Foster Family Charitable Foundation from Central California. It is a project to improve the awareness and appropriate communication and literacy supports and interventions for all of our folks with Angelman syndrome. So I know that is broad, but that's what we're trying to do. It's web-based because it's just simply not possible to try to get face-to-face and in-person with our families when we're such a small part of the general population and we're spread out all over the place. It's designed to present webinars in a sequence. So that if you wanted, you really could start at the beginning and follow every one all the way through like a course, but we're also trying to make sure it's set up in a way that you can join at any time. And this webinar today is really to help you figure out where to join, where your access point is, so you can join right now. Go ahead, Amy. The communication training series is led by a number of us. So my name is Erin Sheldon. I earned my graduate degree studying the educational needs of our students with Angelman. I'm a parent. I have a 12-year-old with deletion-positive Angelman. Dr. Carolyn Musselwhite is a speech-language pathologist with a PhD in special education. For over 30 years, she's been working with really complex kids on both communication and literacy and assistive technology. Maureen Nevers is an augmentative communication specialist out of the state of Vermont and a speech therapist. Mary Louise Bertram is an early childhood educator who lives in Australia. And she was actually the one to kind of spark this movement at the very beginning. She was one of the first educators to start really becoming involved in our community and became more involved than any other educator would ever seen. And it was interesting because when Mary Louise first kind of joined our community and started joining these online forums, and she was talking about how her students were using communication systems and developing literacy skills, a lot of us as parents, myself included, were highly skeptical. And we thought, wow, she must have only the most high-functioning kids that she's working with. But really what she was doing was applying all of the research that we are presenting throughout this year-long webinar series. So we give Mary Louise really the credit for sparking what we call the communication and literacy revolution within our Angelman community. And lastly, the Angelman Syndrome Foundation staff are part of the team, including Amy, who is leading this webinar, or facilitating the webinar. So go ahead, Amy. So the training series really has three different parts. The webinars themselves are obviously a big part of it, but we also have supporting documents to go with each one. And we're still kind of working on which documents are the most helpful for all of you and how to make them more helpful and more accessible. But we have documents such as downloadable copies of all the slides that we present with each webinar. And we also have a Facebook group which for the series, which is really just based on what we've already learned, that when parents and educators and speech therapists can all get together and share their experiences, share advice with each other, but also have access in that kind of social media group to people like Carolyn Musselwhite and Maureen Nevers, that we can really make extraordinary change. So that's what we are trying to do with that Facebook group, is really create that dialogue and that kind of online support group to keep you going. Go ahead, Amy. The ASF has on their website a whole section set aside for the communication training series. And what you'll see in today's webinar is how Maureen Nevers, who is our guru of organization, is kind of reorganizing how the content will be displayed. So it's a little easier for you to find different information specific to whatever you're looking for. So do go to the Angelman website and look at the communication training series section. There's an enormous amount of information up there already, and it's only going to continue to grow over the next year. And go ahead, Amy. What you'll see on that website is a list of all of the upcoming webinars, links for how you can register for webinars as they come up, links to how you can see webinars that have already occurred, and links where you can download the documents that go along with each webinar. And many of the times, many of those documents are just copies of the slides, and others are more intended as handouts to share with other people. Go ahead, Amy. The webinars are all presented live every Thursday from noon to 1. With the exception of this holiday week, we're doing one today and one next Monday, with the expectation that most of you would not be watching this live, that you'll probably watch this archived just because of the busy schedules that we all tend to have over the holidays. But we were just trying to figure out information that might be the most helpful to you if you're maybe off work at some point over the next 2 weeks and might have a little more time. This is kind of your chance to join us and get caught up. Our series is running from September 2015 all the way until next June. It's available to anyone. You don't have to have a person with Angelman in your life to be part of it. That's just who it's very much geared for. You can register at any time for any of the webinars. And like I said already, they're all archived. They're all recorded. You can watch them on YouTube, and you can watch them on the Angelman website. Go ahead, Amy. The webinar resources, there's a few different things that you'll see that might go along with each webinar. So one would be something you can download. It's a PDF of the PowerPoint itself, so you can see those slides again and jog your memory with whatever it is we talked about. We have some additional supporting documents just based on the topic, including books that you might read with your child or handouts that you might share with other people. And you can play the archived versions of the webinars on a Mac, on a PC, or on just about any portable electronic device like an iPad or an iPhone if you just access it via YouTube. Go ahead, Amy. The training series also has a Facebook group, and so everyone who is participating in this is very welcome to join. If you apply to join and you aren't immediately accepted, do check your messages or look at messaging someone so that you can get in, because we have a screening process. We have a screening process to keep spam out, because we were very quickly deluged with spam. People wanting to just join the group who had no connection to the actual communication training series. But families and educators are really encouraged to join and support each other, share your experiences, ask your questions, share whatever tips are working for you, share your successes, share your struggles. Just comment whatever is going on. That's really what we're trying to do, is just create that same kind of online support community that as parents within the Angelman community we already get so much support from in other places on Facebook. So that's just one just specific to our group. And all of us who are team members as part of this communication training series are actively involved in the Facebook group. We can be tagged, and we tag each other to make sure that you can kind of hear directly from presenters on whatever your questions might be. Go ahead, Amy. So here's some instructions on how to join the Facebook group if you've had any trouble. It's a public searchable group, so you should be able to just search for the ASF Communication Training Series, and then you will submit a request to join the group. And I'm one of the group administrators, and we accept anyone where we can see a clear connection. So for example, if you're a parent and you're already part of other Angelman groups, and you already have a bunch of friends in the group, or you're an educator or speech therapist, and that's public on your Facebook profile, it's usually quite easy to see what your connection might be, and we'll just simply accept your request to join right there. And if your Facebook profile is set to more private settings and we can't see that information, then we'll send you a private message and just ask you what your connection is. Now, some people who are trying to join, but they're actually set up in a way where someone who's not their Facebook friend can't even send them a private message. Or if I'm not your Facebook friend and I'm trying to send you a message, it doesn't go to your regular inbox. So some people aren't receiving those messages that we try to send. So if you hear of anyone, so for example, you're a parent, and if you try to get your teacher to join, or your teacher tries to join, or you're a therapist and you're encouraging a family to join and they're saying they're having any problems, that's probably what's happening. And we just need to hear directly from someone to say, hey, can you make sure you accept this person into the group, so that we know what their connection is. Go ahead, Amy. So Each of our webinars has at least one handout that goes with it. The one that's always there is just a copy of the slides so that you can review those afterwards. But there's going to be 2 handouts posted today. We will post these in the Facebook group as well as on the angelman.org website. In the first handout, what Maureen did was just make a table of all of the webinars that we've had to date and all of the webinars that are coming along. And she's calling it my webinar log. So you can actually check off webinars that you've already seen. She's numbered all of the webinars, 1 through 44. That's how many total we're going to have. She gives a quick summary of what the topic is, and I'll explain more about how she's organized the topics in a minute. But so she kind of lets you know what the general topic is, as well as what the actual title is, what date it aired, and who the presenter was. So that it'll just be easier for you to go back and find previous webinars. And on the next slide, Amy, go ahead and switch to the next one. On the next slide, you'll see a second handout where what she's done is, instead of numbering all of the webinars just numerically 1 through 44, now they're organized by topic. And I'll go over those topics in just a minute. But this will help you so that what you're really just looking for is the sets of core words that we're focusing on. There's as part of the handout, you can just see just those webinars. You can see just the ones that focus on IEP goals, just the ones that focus on specific interventions that we're using with our kids, that sort of thing. And that'll make more sense to you once I go through the rest of this webinar. So those handouts will both be available for download usually quite quickly after this webinar. And so we'll get those posted and you can take a look at them. So let me now explain the topic. So Amy, go ahead and advance the slide in terms of how the topics are organized. Perfect. So here's our webinar topic categories. What Maureen did was take a look at each webinar and ask, is this webinar helping explain what this communication training series is in general? And if so, that's the first topic. Is it really helping you be able to write IEP goals and measure whether we're meeting our IEP goals, whether we're making progress? And if so, that's number 2. If it's a webinar that's really focused on an intervention that we are going to use with our kids, and for example, it might be a webinar that might be of particular interest to speech therapists or to educators, but it's really teaching all of us how to do certain interventions, and that's topic number 3. If it's more hands-on in terms of an actual communication support, such as downloadable communication displays would be one, then that would be number 4. If it's related to the topics of reading and writing and how they relate to communication, because literacy and communication, and certainly reading and writing and learning to use a communication system are actually all very entwined in terms of how they develop, and you can see which topics those are. And if it's simply the core vocabulary sets, which are really the foundation of what this series is all about, where we're taking very specific words and learning how to use them with our kids in a much more explicit way, then that's theme number 7, or topic number 7, the core vocabulary set. And I'm going to get into each one just a little bit more with the next slide. So go ahead, Amy. The communication training series, the webinars that are just focused on what the series is, includes our original launch, which we launched at the Angelman Syndrome Foundation this summer in Chicago, as well as webinar number 5, which was sort of your toolbox to your series. It was just an overview of the whole format of the series. And at this point, this webinar is now to some extent going to take the place of that one, in that it's just a little more recent, a little more current. But so these are the webinars that just explain the series. So for example, if you're a parent who's trying to get a school team to understand what this series is all about and why you want them to be part of it, or if you're an educator or speech therapist and you're trying to entice the interest of a family to take part of it, then this is where you would go to be able to explain what the series is and what people would expect from it. Go ahead. If it's topic number 2, then these are where you would go if you're just having trouble writing good IEP goals or figuring out how to take everything we talk about this series and actually reduce it to one of those SMART goals with all of the rules around how we write IEPs that can be so specific to different states and different school boards. But that's really our topic number 2. And as we continue to develop webinars that are specific to that kind of IEP goal development, this is where you'll find them. Go ahead, Amy. Where we're looking at communication interventions, you're going to see quite a bit there because we're really making a big focus of this series being to take everything we know from the research that is the most effective interventions for really long-term, if we want to long-term develop the language capacity of our folks with Angelman. What is it we need to be doing now? And you'll see that we've done 5 webinars just on communication interventions so far. So webinar number 3, called Does Your App Measure Up, explains what we know. This was Maureen, and she just explained what we know from the research so far about if you have a communication system for your person, if you have an app, if you have a paper-based system, how do you know if it actually has all of the elements that we know are really essential? Number 4, our 4th webinar, was called Aided Language Input or Aided Language Stimulation, which means that we all know that if we want someone to learn a foreign language, they need to be immersed in the language. They need to hear other people using the system. And what decades of research have shown us is that if we want folks to use a visual communication system because they can't use speech, they actually need to be immersed in it just like it's a foreign language. And so Carolyn Musselwhite did a whole webinar on exactly what that is, what that looks like, and how to really have fun with it. And then Maureen came back, so Maureen Nevers came back and did one on core vocabulary and what core vocabulary is. So if you're listening to this and you have no idea what I'm talking about, then that might be a good webinar for you to go check out. But core vocabulary just means that we're going to focus our communication systems and our interventions on using those really high frequency words that we use all across the day. Words like I and like and want and you, rather than really specific words that we only use a few times a day like granola bar or cookie or iPad, because when we focus our communication interventions on getting kids to request particular things, they can only request them so many times in a day, and that doesn't actually build long-term language development the way the core vocabulary does. So any questions about that? We have a whole webinar on it. We have a webinar on what's called non-directive language, so how to immerse our kids in us using their communication system, to invite them and entice them to communicate with us rather than accidentally turning their communication system into something that's always a test, where we're always saying, show me, touch the, where is. If you find that every time you get out your student system, you're using phrases like that, then the non-directive language webinar would be really good for you, because that's how you can make sure that you're really providing that immersion in it as a language and really developing language development rather than training kids to be able to touch something when told but not actually use their system to communicate their own ideas and their own thoughts when they want to. And the last one is called just engineering environments, and really that's a fancy term for how do we just set up our physical spaces so it's easy to do this. What are some of the strategies that other people have found that make it really effective to be able to easily do what we're talking about here? Because you can have the best iPad and the best iPad app, but if it's not where you need it when you need to talk to your student, then it's not actually going to help you. On our next slide, we talk about some of the communication supports, webinars, and resources. So here again, we have some duplication here with Does Your App Measure Up? which is just how do you tell if the communication support that you have in place for your student is currently enough, and what are the elements that the research tells us that it still needs, right? So how to know if there's enough words and enough types of words to actually use it for language development. Webinars 18 and 19 were a direct response to people within the Angelman community saying, I went and got this app called Proloquo Go. I loaded it on my child's iPad, but I don't know what this core vocabulary is that you're talking about. My child is currently using their Proloquo for things like requesting. And so what we did was we outreached to the Proloquo Go developers, and they did a whole webinar for our Angelman community specific to how to make sure that your Proloquo Go is set up in a way that you can follow this series. And similarly, we heard from a bunch of folks who had selected a system called POD, and they couldn't figure out how to get started with POD and how to follow the series using POD. So, so we again outreached within the POD community, and Mary Louise Bertram did that, and we've got some more POD support coming. If you're using a different system and you're running into the same problem, just let us know, and we will do what we can to get you that same kind of specific support for specific tools, whatever tool it is that you may have chosen. And then on our next slide, you'll see what we're starting to do around reading. We're only 3 or 4 months into the series so far. We've got 2 webinars specific to reading, and they really begin with the developmental progression of what kids do with books. So how to make sure that all of our folks with Angelman are really exploring books and are really engaged by them, and how can we find books that are age respectful? How can we find books that meet our kids where they're at with whatever their current language development is? How can we select books and adapt books so that they can really access them and really start to find joy and meaning in exploring books? So if those are kind of your questions, then you want to look at the reading as communication section. And similarly, on the next slide, we talk about writing as communication. And where that's really crucial is what we've learned from the research is that when I have an idea in my head and I want to communicate it with someone else, but I can't talk, so I have to instead visually access, I have to instead, touch something to communicate my thoughts. But what happens in my head is actually much more like writing than it is like speaking, because I have to take whatever I'm thinking and reduce it to whatever words I have access to and share them with someone else. And so when we start doing writing activities with our kids, when we start doing shared writing, when we start using their communication system to do writing and to write simple books, it's actually one of the most important ways that we can support their communication. And it really teaches us a lot about their communication system, how it works, gets us very familiar with it, very comfortable with it, and also kind of slows us down in terms of how we use it. So do check out the writing sections. If you've got a system in place and you're just really trying to figure out how to deepen your child's level of engagement with it, how to deepen your own level of engagement with your students' communication system, then the writing webinars might be some of your most helpful. And then finally, on the next slide, we'll see that the last topic where how the webinars are set up is the core vocabulary sets. And this will answer some of your questions in terms of what are these core sets. What we did was we took what we could find of the best research about what are the most important words that a student needs at school, that a student needs at home, that a student needs out in the community. What are the words that give kids the most ability to communicate with the most people? And how can all of us, as their supporters, as their parents, as their educators, as their therapists, as their friends, how can all of us learn to use those words with them to help immerse them in that language of using symbols so that they can start using their words in all parts of their life? And what we've done is we're taking 4 words every month, and each one is its own core set. And we talk about how to take a look at what will, in the beginning, just look like some pretty random abstract words, and how can we really use them. You can use the webinars to just give you ideas about how to use those words, how to just create more opportunity to use the words, help you realize how flexible these words are so that we really can use them all throughout the day. And I would say that if you're trying to get started now in the series, when we're already 4 months in and we're coming up on January's webinar where we'll introduce the next set of core words, you don't necessarily have to start with Core 1, but let's go ahead and look at what Core 1 was. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And this is what our Core 4 look like each month. So webinar number 6 was our first set of Core 4. And you can think of these as really the 4 most high-frequency words that kids can use at school, at home, in the community to communicate a really broad range of activities. And you can tell from looking at it. I mean, this looks pretty abstract, but we're supposed to use words I, like, want, and not. And how do we do that? So we have a whole webinar about all the different ways to use these words, and we built on that over the subsequent webinars. And so you'll see, if you start to kind of explore set 1, what we're talking about in terms of giving ourselves opportunities, finding books that use these words so that we can use them, or finding opportunities to use these words. So imagine you're getting started right now. You're taking a look at these 4 words. You've only watched this webinar so far, and you're looking at your child's communication system, and you're trying to figure out how you would start using this. Well, if you celebrate Christmas in your house, Christmas morning, or any other holiday that you might be celebrating over this holiday period, you're going to have a lot of reasons to use words like and want. And every time your person with Angelman laughs or smiles with interest in something, that's one of your opportunities to do things like model the word like. And just use their system to find that word and talk about it. And you'll get much more specific ideas if you watch the whole webinar number 6 on the first set. But that's what those core vocabulary sets are, is we just take these high-frequency words and give you lots of ideas about how to use them all across the day. So if we go to our next slide, I think the major issue that I'm noticing with all the families that we're hearing from is really, so Amy, go ahead and progress the slides, is really where do we go next? And we talk about the webinar series, and people are go and look on the website and they see there's already, I think, about 20 webinars, and where do I get started? So I just want to walk you through some ideas about your next step. So Amy, if you progress, what Maureen calls it is your personal +1. So my hope is that over the next few minutes, as you look at these different scenarios I'm going to show you, you'll be able to identify the next step that you might take on your journey. Know that wherever you are at, whatever you are currently doing for communication with your person, there are many, many Angelman families who are not yet where you are. If all you've done so far is you're watching this webinar and you're trying to figure out where to get started, you're still further ahead than many other people. And there's other families who have already been there and have moved on, and you can learn from their experience. So wherever you're at is simply where you're at, and it's all good. So I think the number 1 rule I want to say is don't beat yourself up for wherever you are. Wherever you are is simply where you're at. If we go to the next slide, something I'm hearing from a number of people is I have no idea where to start. So people hear about the series, they hear about other people going out buying iPads, buying apps, and they just don't know where to get started. So if that's where you're at, our recommendation is just go back and watch webinar number 1. It's just a video recording of the launch of this project from the ASF conference that happened last July. And I think that will start to give you an idea of where to get started. And the second thing I would ask you to do is join the communication training series and just introduce yourself. And you will find that there's a whole bunch of other people out there who have no idea where to start. And I'm hoping that by just all of you meeting each other and us hearing from you in the series, in the group, that we'll be able to help get you to the next step after that. So if that's where you're at, that is our recommendation. If we go to the next slide, another very common thing we're hearing is, I have an iPad, but we don't have an app yet. What app should we get? Where should we start in terms of knowing which app to get our child? So now there's 2 webinars I would really encourage you to watch. So again, the first one, the launch and the introduction, so that you get a beginning of an overview about how we're going to use these apps, so you know what you're looking for. And then you really want to watch webinar number 3 called Does Your App Measure Up? And that's where Maureen helps you understand what needs to be in that app, what needs to be in the vocabulary in the app, what words need to be in that system, so you know if it's a strong enough system to really develop language over time. And just like with the first group, I hope you are also will also join our ASF Communication Training Series group in Facebook and introduce yourself, because you'll find that there's a whole bunch of other people in the same boat as you. If we go to the next slide, here's one of the most next common questions we get, which is, I have an iPad and I have an app, so where do I start? And if that's where you're at, then what I really recommend you do is, again, go back and watch webinar number 3 called Does Your App Measure Up? Because before you can really launch into the series, you'll see what it is you need to have in place to be able to use whatever system you have to move forward. There's a whole bunch of different systems that you might have that will work just fine for you to be able to participate in the series and help develop language for your person. But you won't know if what you've got is good enough without watching Maureen's webinar on Does Your App Measure Up? Once you've watched that, if we move to the next slide, you very likely will be able to say, I have an AAC system with a robust vocabulary. If you can't say that yet, then you need to go back and watch webinar number 3 so you know whether or not this is true. But if this is true, then where we're recommending you get started is now to watch webinar number 4 called Aided Language Input or Aided Language Stimulation. And it's where Carolyn Musselwhite really talks about how you are going to use your person's communication system to start providing that kind of immersive language environment that we would use if we were trying to teach someone a foreign language, by really starting to use their system with them so they have an idea, a model of how that system can be used. If you have an AAC system and you know it has a good vocabulary, the next thing you might start with is webinar number 6, which is our first set of core words. And I showed you what those 4 words were. And so it was I, like, want, and not. And you can watch that and just get some ideas about how you would use those words all across the day, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, a therapist, how you would use those words. If the communication system you have has a robust vocabulary, and if it's either Proloquo or Pod, then we do have those product-specific webinars for you that aren't directly part of the whole series, but were really just a response to the needs we heard from people taking the series. If you have a different system and you know it has a robust vocabulary, but you need some help with that specific system, feel free to reach out to us and we will help figure out whatever that product-specific support is that would help you. Now, if we go to the next slide, you might be part of the large number of people who are saying, okay, I started the series with the very best of intentions, but I have fallen behind. And something I'm hearing from a lot of people is, over the holidays, I'm going to sit down and do a 20-hour marathon trying to catch up on every webinar. And so our first piece of advice is, please don't try to catch up. What we've been trying to do is take all of the information that we think is most helpful to people and really provide it in kind of smaller, more bite-sized, more digestible pieces so that you can kind of take in some new information and actually work on it before you try to take in more information. And if you try to watch 18 webinars in a row, you know, it's going to be like that massive Thanksgiving dinner where you just gorged, but later you actually can't remember any specific thing that you ate. So don't try to go back and catch up. Don't try to watch all of them. The way the series is designed, you can go back at any time and watch any individual one, or you can go back and watch what you've missed in series, and that can be your work for next fall. It can be your work for next summer. It can be the kind of thing that you're going to work on a year from now. There's really enough content in this webinar series to keep you busy for several years. So don't try to go back and catch up. I think you'll actually sabotage yourself. And I think that experience would be more like, you know, the dieter who says, as of this moment, I'm never going to eat anything unhealthy for me ever again. And then fairly quickly, you eat something unhealthy, you've now sabotaged yourself, and now you're even more discouraged than you were before. And obviously it's the holidays, and so I'm using lots of food analogies, but hopefully that makes sense to you. So don't do that. But do think about going back to the last course that you watched. If you started the series in the beginning, then there's been 4 core sets so far. So set 1, 2, 3, and 4. Whichever one was the most recent, go back, just watch that one, and just try to implement that from now on. So just whatever that next set of words were that we introduced, just think about how you can use those over the next few weeks before we introduce the January set. And I would not try to go back and review any more than that. Let's go to the next slide, and let's say that you're one of the people who says, well, look, we have a robust app. My child has a system like TouchChat or ProPro and Pod. He's using it well for some things. If it's a core word system, then the most common thing we hear is he's requesting really well with it. How do we get started with the series? Does this series apply to us? And what would we do to try to get him or her to use it in just more complex ways, more interactive ways, and not just use their robust communication system like a textbook where it's really just being used for requesting. So I've got 2 suggestions for you there. If you already have a system in place but you haven't really been following the series, your student is already using the system in some ways, then go back and watch webinar number 11. It's called Shared Writing with Things I Like. And what you're going to be doing is looking at those high-frequency words that your student may very well already know, but we're going to apply them. We're going to reduce them to writing. We're going to turn them into some really simple adapted books that allow your student to share more of what he or she likes with all the people around them. So they can start having conversations, so they can start having richer social interaction. That's what we do with these books that we write with our kids' systems, is we take something, maybe a message about all the things we like about Christmas, and we reduce it to writing so we can have that conversation about Christmas over and over again over the Christmas holidays with other people who might also care about Christmas or cats or school or family or whatever it is your person likes. So if that's where you're at, I recommend go back, watch webinar number 11, and then join us in a week when we talk about shared writing about personal experiences. And we'll take all the different kinds of things that your person might enjoy doing and talk about how to, again, use their system to talk about what it is that they like and they do, and reduce it to writing so that it can be more easily be used as the basis of conversation and interaction with other people. Because we know that for almost all of our folks with Angelman, really their overriding interest in communication is if it results in social interaction, that they just really want to share who they are and learn more about other people. And that is really the role of writing. One of the next groups, if we go to the next slide, you might be part of the group. Maybe you've got a pod book. You've been modeling for quite a while, but your student just really isn't using it yet. You're still in that phase, which is a very common phase, where you're providing that kind of immersive environment as often as you can, but your student just hasn't started yet learning it. And you can just imagine this being similar to if you wanted to learn French and so you went to Paris, there's going to be a certain period of time where you're really just listening and trying to absorb the language before you actually try to speak it. And that might be where your student is right now. So if that's where you're at, what I would recommend you start with is maybe go back and look at book exploration so that you can, that was webinar number 9, and just look at more of the strategies you can use while reading to model your system a little more intensively and get kids more excited about books. Because books tend to be just a really gorgeous opportunity to both model their system and also start to invite them to use it more, to share more of their thoughts. So that's kind of where I would start, because you can then use the strategies that you'll learn in that webinar at times such as bedtime, where you might already do some book sharing together, and just kind of develop that routine of how you read together to hopefully get more communication. And then think about joining us next week for the same webinar I just talked about on shared writing about personal experiences, because what we'll do is give you some ideas about how to create some very simple books that don't take long to make, that help our students share who they are so that they can have that social interaction with other people. And finally, the last group that I'm hearing quite a bit from is actually the group I'm the worried most about. And they say, I'm so far behind. The other parents have done so much more for their kids. I don't think I can even catch up. I don't think I can begin to live up to the standard that, that other parents have already set. And if you are one of those parents, I just want to first say, just breathe. The fact that you are watching this webinar and that you're trying to figure this out, it actually means you're ahead of the curve. When we've had a whole number of conversations and an informal survey within our Angelman community, most of our families are not yet at a point of really figuring out a communication system. So it is not too late, and you've not fallen too far behind. My next question is, are you having fun yet? If, when you think about communication, if you think about reading and writing, but especially communication and your child, if it feels like such overwhelming work to even think of starting, if it feels like it's such an overwhelming challenge, then I would say stop thinking about it and just go have some fun with your person. Whatever it is you love to do, maybe it's wrestling, maybe it's playing in the snow, maybe it's swimming and bath time, whatever it is your person loves to do, go do it. Just go have some fun together. And just start thinking about all the words you use while you're doing it. There's a lot of words like that you're actually going to use while you're doing it. There's words you're going to be thinking while you're having fun. So just go have fun, because nobody ever sits down just to communicate. You know, if someone walked up to you right now and said, let's have a conversation, and they just stared at you, you would stare back at them going, I have no idea where to start. And that's because you're putting communication ahead of why we communicate. If you just go out and go have some fun, enjoy your person, and remember, if you are a parent, because I most often hear this from parents, you are the only mother or father that person is ever going to have. They are going to have so many educators and so many therapists and so many really well-intentioned professionals in their lives, but they're only ever going to have one you. So the one thing to most focus on is just having fun. And if communication has become all about work, then just stop. Back off, go have fun, and then we'll figure out how to insert the communication in a more fun way. I want you to just choose one really small task you're going to work on, just one. And really often that starts with just having fun with our person and thinking about all the words we used while having fun with them. So if your person really loves to wrestle and you're like, again, I wrestle you some more, so I tickle you some more, well, then more is one of those words that you're already using. And all we talk about in this series is how to, in addition to saying the word more, how you can use our communication system to also say more, so that you can provide that model of how your person can use the word more or again to continue the interaction that you're already having. If you really like to play with blocks or Play-Doh, if you guys really enjoy bath time or swimming, just my only task for you is to think about the words you're already using during that activity that you both already enjoy. Maybe it's looking through photo albums and the camera roll on his or her iPad, whatever it is. Just start paying attention to the words you use. And if that If that doesn't then kind of give you an idea of what your next step is, then ask for help. Come to the Facebook training series group and just say, here's where we're at. My person really enjoys this. Where do I get started? What is the language I can use during that activity? And we'll help walk you through it from there. But if we go to the next slide, you'll see it's never too early to get started, and it's never too late. And in fact, what we're seeing in places like Australia, where there's been, in Western Australia, where there was a more intensive communication intervention all across the lifespan for a large number of people with Angelman, it was actually the adults who made the fastest progress. So just know it's never too late. Our people with Angelman are learning how to understand language, to understand what purpose language serves all across their life, but they can't access it without a communication system. But they can still do some of that. They're still doing some of that early language development even before they have one. We're going to kickstart it with a communication system. We're going to show them how they can be active participants with language as soon as they have a communication system. But this time before then is not wasted time. So it's not too late. Wherever you're at, it's not too late. You can get started now. And you'll see on the next slide, Jennifer Martin, a speech therapist, shared a meme in the Facebook group that I thought was just really helpful for all of us to hear right now, that if we want to have just huge, staggering long-term results where our people with Angelman are communicating all the ideas we had no idea they were thinking, what's going to get us there is really small daily improvements. And in the beginning, it's not the small daily improvements that they make. It's actually the small daily improvements that we make. It's what we do with language, what we do with their system to model it, that's going to get there. So if you're going to have the staggering long-term results of where you've created a really effective, immersive environment for your person to learn about Angelman, or to learn about communication, then it's your small daily improvements that are going to be the key to create that environment. So think about that, and I hope the webinar series will help get you there. I'm just going to wrap up with Maureen's action step ideas, and so she's laid these out in kind of 3 different ways, or sort of a sequence. So first, you're learning new information and new ideas. And then you're going to extend and deepen your learning by sharing what you're learning with other people, using this information to prepare and plan, and then you're going to finally apply this learning directly with whatever person with Angelman you are supporting. So on our next slide, you'll see that to get to the learning stage, the most helpful thing you can do is watch some of the webinars, and hopefully you have an idea now of which webinars you want to watch, so that you can be targeted. Don't try to watch all of them, but just watch some specific webinars that might be the most helpful to you right now. Read over the handouts and raise this as a topic in the Facebook group so that you can first learn the new information you need. Next, we're going to extend your learning. And you're going to extend your learning. We know that you will learn more if you share it with other people. You'll deepen your own learning if you share it with other people. You will extend your learning if you use what you learned by watching a webinar to actually now do something. So one thing you might do is just write down some personal action steps that you want to take next. And if you've already watched a webinar, then you've already done one. Make sure you check that off and give yourself credit for it. Maybe you want to download some of the reading books that have been shared as part of the reading webinars that just use those really high frequency words like and not. Maybe you're going to just go access the other online materials. Maybe you're going to write out a plan. Maybe you're going to prepare some materials. Maybe you're going to take your child's app and put it on additional iPads so that you have something to model. Maybe you're going to take screenshots of their app and you're going to print them out and laminate them so that you have paper versions that you can use when you don't have the iPad charged or handy. Whatever you're going to do, you'll see those ideas. You'll learn those ideas in one of the webinars that you go back to watch. But think about what your next step is going to be to extend your learning. And then the final step is that you need to apply your learning. So directly with your person with Angelman, you're going to practice using it in some way. So maybe you already had Proloquo or Pod, you just hadn't quite figured out where to get started. You go back and you watch the webinars on aided language stimulation, and you watch the first core, you watch the getting started, and now we just have to start practicing using it. Because the number one thing to know about all of this new stuff we have to do with our kids, talking to them with their communication system, it sounds really daunting, but really all it is a new habit. We're just trying to form a new habit. We're trying to form a new habit where instead of just talking to them with the words from our mouth, we're also talking to them using our fingers with visuals, because they can't form words with their mouth to be able to talk, but they can learn to use their fingers with visuals to say the same thing. So we're just trying to form a new habit of talking to them in a way that they can watch how we talk and realize that they can communicate the same thing. That's really all we're trying to do. It's a new habit. And the way that we form a new habit is practice. We just practice. We try to do it more and more. So maybe you're going to try to practice by setting a goal for the number of times across the week that you're going to do it. Maybe you're going to say every night at bath time, or every night at meal time, or every night at bedtime. That's where I'm going to try to model 3 words, or 1 word, or 10 words, wherever you're at. Just figure out where you're at, set one goal, and start forming that as a habit. And once it's a habit, it's much easier to start building on that habit and start making that habit more intense. So that is pretty much the end of the webinar. Go ahead, you'll see the next slide is for questions. While you're thinking about any questions, let's just go to the next slide and just give our thanks to the Foster Family Charitable Foundation. This whole series has been made available by the Angelman Syndrome Foundation because of the support of the Foster Family Charitable Foundation in Central California, and that's how we're able to try to make all these materials and make them publicly accessible to all the rest of you. And do we have any questions?
We don't have any questions just yet, so maybe there's a collective sigh of relief that everyone knows what to do from here on out, or they're just formulating questions. So we'll give them a second. Let me see if anyone has their hand raised too. Nope, I don't see any hands raised.
All right.